So this workshop is a little different, or I should say a lot different than what I've done in the past, because it's really the culmination of the past 20 years of work that I've done in terms of experience. So you'll find elements of some workshops from before, like the financial freedom workshop. You'll see elements of it, but this also adds a prequel and a sequel to that work. So like I said, this is really, for me, exciting. And it was the challenging part was really scaling it down and creating usable nuggets for today in the hopes that you'll continue on and try to get the bigger picture of it. So like I said, there'll be some familiar aspects to it, and then some will probably be brand new. And like usual, I don't mind if you ask questions. Don't let me just glance over things or fly by things and you're totally lost, because if you do that, then you'll miss some really good gems and you'll really be stuck where you're at. So stop me if you have to and ask questions, but if you're not asking a question, please mute yourself. All right, so what I'm going to do is share my screen. You should be able to see my slides, hopefully. Yeah. All right, so we have a reality that we have to face in America because there's really the haves and the have-nots. So we live in a $25.46 trillion economy, which is the #1 economy in the entire world. And we have an increase in billionaires from 720 to 775 last year. So that means some people are making even more money than ever. We have 22 million millionaires in the United States. And at the same time, we have 37.9 million people who live in poverty. And poverty is defined in America by making $26,500 or less as a household. So we really have a situation where some of us are looking at heaven from hell, right? And so we have this, and I can relate to that, and I think a lot of you can. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. Some of you know my story, the new people don't. I grew up in an impoverished neighborhood in the East New York section of Brooklyn. And I didn't have models of financial success. I didn't have models of making money in any other way except working or doing something illegal. And so coming up in that environment, you don't really see a pathway forward to being wealthy, except if you're an athlete or an entertainer. And since I don't entertain very well, I went the track of a lot of young males in the hood. I wanted to be an athlete. And so I pursued football with everything I had. And it took me far. I got to play college football. But the reality of that is you have 1.5 million high school football players. You only have 70,000 college football players. And out of those 70,000, every year, maybe 250 to 300 go to the pros. So you can have enormous talent, and the odds of you making it to the NFL, even if you make it to the college level, which is still tough odds, is far less than zero. And so when you put all of your eggs in that basket and it doesn't work, then you kind of get stuck, right? But it doesn't stunt the desire to be wealthy. And I think most people have that desire to find a way to create wealth for themselves. So we have to really look at our situation and think about where we're at, why we're there, and what we can do to change it. So if we look at the average income, and we're talking about household income, that's usually 2 incomes at least coming into a household. In 2022, half of American households made less than $75,000 a year. And that's gross. I'm not talking about after taxes. I'm talking about gross income from all sources, $75,000 a year. And you know that it is extremely challenging to live a comfortable lifestyle, especially if you have a family, on $75,000 in a year. When you couple that with, on top of the $75,000, the average American household pays 32% of their gross income in taxes. So if you look at that $75,000, $24,000 go to taxes right off the top. So now you're looking at, such a small amount of money to live on. It's almost insane. So when we, it shouldn't be a surprise that 69% of adults in America have less than $1,000 in savings. It would be extremely difficult to have anything left if you're working on, like $51,000 for a family. So what's worse than that, 34% have no savings at all. So don't have $1,000. So if an emergency came up, a crisis came up, and stuff happens, right? So your transmission goes out, you can't fix it. You have a copay on a big medical bill, you can't pay it. And so we have people falling into this trap of debt and this trap of going backwards and having what we call negative net worth, because the debt exceeds the income that they have, and they can't get out of it. And every year it seems to get worse and worse and worse and worse. So when we look at the median net worth, and I'm going to use a lot of, I'm going to introduce you, if you don't know, to a lot of language, new language for some of you, because it's important, right? You can't understand something if you don't understand the language of that level you're trying to go to. And that's a big issue for a lot of people. You're excluded because the language seems encrypted, right? And so you'll hear terms every day: interest rates. You'll hear terms inflation. You'll hear terms, the bond yield, the curve, and you'll hear all these things, and it means nothing to you. And because it means nothing to you, you can't take advantage of the things that are offered on the level where it would make sense to you. So I'm going to talk to you in language. I'm going to explain certain concepts, and I want you, if you don't understand, please, like I said again, stop me. But you can't move past where you are if you don't understand the language of the next level that you're trying to get to. So we're going to talk about net worth. Net worth is the difference between your asset values, and your liabilities. So what in the world does that mean? We're going to talk a little more later about assets, but assets are things of value. So if you're just talking about regular financial assets, it's anything that you could sell for a profit, right? So it could be your furniture, your car, your house, your stocks, your bonds, anything that has value technically is an asset. And then we have asset classes, which we're going to talk about later. So is that minus your liabilities? So what are your liabilities? All the debts that you've incurred. So if you bought a house and it's worth $100,000, but you owe $90,000 in the mortgage, then you subtract the $90,000, then you have $10,000 net worth from the house. So the average net worth in America, or median, which I should say, median is different from average. Median is right in the middle. That means it's pretty much 50% of the population has less than, and 50% of the population that has more than. The median net worth is $97,300. And when you think about it, the vast majority of people's net worth is tied up into their home. So if you're a homeowner and you still only have $93,700 worth of net worth, that means you're carrying a significant amount of debt. It gets worse when you talk about the average. So when you average the total net worth of Americans, is $76,200, which is even far less. It gets worse if you're under 35. If you're under 35, the median net worth, that means right in the middle, is only $11,100, because most people under 35 are not homeowners, and so their net worth may be tied up into their vehicle or some other smaller things. And so when you talk about net worth, that's how you determine wealth. So if you say somebody's a millionaire, they have $1 million net worth, not $1 million in cash. So if you have $11,100 net worth, that's the total value of all the assets you own minus all the liabilities that you have. What's scary is 14% of American households, which is 16 million households, have what you call a negative net worth, meaning they owe more than the value of the things that they own. So we live in a country, again, that is the #1 economy in the world, yet we have a significant 14%, a significant amount of the population that is more in debt than the value of everything that they own. And that's scary. So what we have to understand is time is an amplifier of all things. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but time is the amplifier of all things. And so if you have negative growth, right, you're going backwards. In time, that growth will become greater in the negative. if you have positive growth, that growth will grow greater than the positive. But what we don't understand about money is money doesn't grow linearly, right? So it's not like this year you're $1 in debt, next year you're $2 in debt. Because debt has interest attached to it, debt grows in a compounded way. The same way that interest, right, grows in a compounded way. It's not linear. Time amplifies and compounds everything. And so one thing you have to understand is the time is going to pass by, whether you do something or you do not do anything. Time is going to pass by and will amplify the position that you're already in. So if you want to turn things around, then you're going to have to do something dramatically different so that that time element becomes your friend and not your enemy. So you have to ask yourself, and you know, you're most of you are very intelligent. I've met most of you, so I know you're very intelligent. I've spoken to you on many occasions, so I know you have the desire. So there's no lack of desire. There's no lack of willingness to work hard. There's no lack of intelligence. Yet there's some of you who have been around me for a decade or more, and some who are new and have not advanced very far. And that used to trouble me, and it was baffling to me for a long time why people didn't make a big leap once they were given the information. Right? Because it's one thing not to have the information, and a lot of people have been there, right? So we know there's different levels of knowing, right? There's the unconsciously unconscious, meaning you don't know, but you don't know you don't know. And there's a lot of people in that arena, but you know, they say ignorance is bliss. When you don't know that there's more, maybe that's not such a bad place to be. And then we have consciously unconscious, meaning that you know there's more, but you don't know those things that you need to know to advance yourself. So you're conscious that there's other information that you don't have. And then there's consciously conscious, meaning you know there's new information, you have the information, but you have to think about it constantly and stay on it, right? You have to be very focused on it in order to achieve it. And then you have a level of mastery, which is unconsciously conscious, where it becomes a part of who you are and you don't have to think about it anymore. And most of the people that I've encountered over the last 2 decades are either consciously unconscious or consciously conscious, but have difficulty making the leap from being consciously conscious to unconsciously conscious. And then again, that part troubled me, and it was only really in the last few years that that part made sense to me. I realized it's not people's fault, because you have 2 strikes against you that you would never see. And the only reason that I was able to really get to this is because I have a lot of time on my hands. Since I have a lot of time on my hands, I do a lot of reading, a lot of research when everybody else is working. And one area of study that I dug deeply into is evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology. And I really wanted to dig and get into what makes man tick, not from the influences necessarily of today, but how are we wired? You know, what drives certain behaviors? And so we know we have the 2 main drivers, right, are survival and reproduction. Those are the 2 main human drivers, right, as a human animal. So we're wired specifically to be able to survive and be fit, right? So fitness is being able to reproduce or being a good mate. So let's just talk about how nature and then nurture, right? Because it's not only nature, because we're wired a certain way, but then how does the environment affect your genotype? So how does your environment affect the way you're wired? And what I realized is that Homo sapiens, the form that we're in today, is 250,000 years old. And evolution is extremely slow. So we have not evolved from the way we were wired 250,000 years ago. So we're 250,000-year-old primates, basically, trying to navigate in a high-tech, fast-paced world. right? So we're using old software in a whole new world. So that's like taking your old, what was that first Windows thing, and trying to, run it today on a new computer. The world is moving way faster than our ability to adapt to it. And so you have to understand that as a human being, as a survival mechanism, you are designed and you are wired for economy of effort and energy, right? Because that was a survival mechanism when you didn't have a corner store or a Whole Foods and all these other things. When food was scarce, you were wired for economy of energy and effort, and to minimize the risk of loss, because loss can be devastating, and minimize the risk of self-harm. So when you look at those things that you're wired for and how they affect who you are today, because it's not something you're conscious of, it's part of your design to be risk adverse, to be conservative, to once you're familiar with something, to stick with it, right? Because that's the way your brain works. Your brain is really a prediction machine, but a prediction machine based on the information that it already has. And so when you go to a new place, it becomes unpredictable. Your brain doesn't like that. Your body doesn't like that. It senses danger. It senses to move away from that, right? So as we move away from danger and move towards the familiar and comfortability. So our survival mechanisms do not compel us to do what is novel or new, right? It doesn't compel us to do what's challenging, because that could exhaust resources internally or externally. It doesn't challenge us to do what's uncomfortable, because we're wired for comfort. So even when there's the potential for a greater outcome, as long as the outcome you're getting currently is not untenable, is not so bad that it forces you to move away from it. Again, we move away from what we feel is uncomfortable or bad. We move towards pleasure and what we feel is good. Until it becomes so untenable that you feel it's affecting your survival, it is difficult to compel yourself to take a chance on something that is new, that is challenging, that seems risky, that is unfamiliar. And so you don't even think about it, but you're always apprehensive about that. And if you go back to the way you've pretty much run your life, if you go back to school, most people, I say, well, how did you choose your major in school? Oh, I liked it. I thought it was easy. And then I thought I could make some money with it, right? That's how they did it. I liked it. I thought it was easy, right? You don't say, I didn't really like it. I thought it was going to be hard and challenging, so I took it because I knew it could potentially give me the best outcome. We don't think like that. And the same thing when you talk about employment. Why'd you choose that job? I liked it. I thought it would be kind of easy, and it could make some money. Same thing when you say, well, why are you selling that product or service? Same thing, right? We never start from the other end of it and say, well, this is the outcome I was looking for, and I chose the path that would get me that, even though it was challenging, even though it was new, even though it was uncomfortable. We don't start at the end. We start internally from how we feel. And then we try to move forward from there. And the moment it feels uncomfortable, the moment it feels unfamiliar, the moment it feels challenging, we stop. And so you're wired that way. We also have to understand, in terms of our human evolution, for most of those 250,000 years, we were hunter-gatherers, right? So it was agriculture only came about in the last 10,000 years and really spread maybe in the last 3,000 to 4,000 years globally. So for most of our human history, we experience what we call linear growth and immediate gratification, meaning if I hunted today, I got an animal. If I foraged today, I got some crops. But that animal didn't turn into 5 animals, or those crops didn't turn into 10, 10 crops, 10 bushels of crops, whatever. So we're used to, I work, I receive, I don't work, I don't receive, and the outcome is immediate. So it is difficult, especially even when we transformed into pastoral societies and agrarian societies, when we began to grow food and herd animals, the gratification was only still delayed maybe seasonally, right? And then we kind of moved back when we got to the industrial age, back to the same way as a hunter-gatherer. I work, you pay me every Friday or every other Friday. I work these hours, so it's a direct connection. My labor to the outcome, my labor to the outcome, and the growth is linear, right? And that's the way we have evolved, and that's what most of us are familiar with. And so it is difficult for people to make the transition to the world of wealth because it doesn't work that way at all. You work hard once and you wait a long time for this thing to mature, and you make some modifications to make it sustainable. And then later you make a few modifications to make it grow some more. But the gratification is delayed. The return is delayed. The outcome is delayed. And that is part of the reason it makes it so hard when your whole childhood and your whole adult life, everything you've done has been immediate feedback, an immediate return, or immediate loss. And now we're saying you have to do this work, wait for the feedback in the terms of a gain or a loss down the road. It's hard for people to accept that, and even to understand it. It's so foreign to us as humans. So we have to. So that's nature. But when we look at nurture, everything that's happened to you in terms of your upbringing and your education and everything that's influenced you from external sources has reinforced that same evolutionary drive. So your family, right, has reinforced that because they model the behavior, and the advice that they can give you is only from the level that they're at. And so I know my parents said, go to school, get a good education so you can get a good job with benefits so you can retire and live happily ever after. I know my parents told them pretty much the same thing, but leave the small manufacturing town that you grew up in and go to the big city. So my parents got from New York. Leave the small manufacturing town and go to the big city. And my grandparents' parents told them, leave the farm that you're on and go to this small manufacturing town because that's right. And but it was the same thing. Go to get the most from your labor, get the immediate feedback in terms of income. And, you know, if you get more education, you can get more income from the labor and more benefits from it in the long run. And so your family reinforced it, your social groups, you socialize with people who are on your level because you run across them. They have the same interests. They talk about the same things. They have the same family structure. They have the same politics. They have the same, they join the same organizations. And so your social group even reinforces that. The educational institutions that you were in, and I was an educator, so I know our mandate was to make children adults that are productive members of society. That's what we were told we were supposed to do. But what did that mean from that perspective? And all good intentions from educators, but they can't teach you to go beyond where they know. So educators believe they're productive members of society, and so they're teaching you to be on that level as a worker, whether it's a blue-collar worker or a white-collar worker. To be a part of the labor force is what you train. That's what the educational system is trains kids for, is to be a part of the labor force. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but if you want more than that, then that doesn't help you. The media that you choose to get your entertainment from and your information from, again, reinforces where you're at. And sometimes, like you and I can watch the news probably the same time, watch the same news and get totally different information from it, because some information, I don't want to say is encrypted because it's not encrypted intentionally, right? But, and I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and on the news the other day, they said the Federal Reserve held back in raising interest rates, but the next quarter they might. And for most people, that means absolutely nothing. That means zero. For me, I said, ooh, the stock market's going to go down tomorrow when they hear that information. And then that's a good time for me to invest because it's going to bounce back because they didn't raise the interest rates. And I had at least another quarter before I have to be concerned with making another adjustment. Same information, but what did it mean to somebody who's on the next level? So if you heard interest rates are going up, most people get upset. because they say, oh, that means I have an adjustable rate credit card, then my credit card interest is going to go up. Or it's going to cost me more to borrow money for a car, or it's going to cost me more if I want a mortgage for a home. So if you're on a certain level, you just ignore it altogether because you don't even have the money to consume anything. But if you're on the middle class and you're a consumer, then you see it as a negative thing. If you are on another level, the next level, then two things, right? You're like, okay, I can't wait until they raise the interest rates the next quarter, because that means all interest income for me is going to be, it's going to be great. But in the meantime, that's going to affect the stock market. And I don't care about the tech stocks. All the tech stocks are going to drop because they live off of borrowed money. So they're going to drop. But all the consumer staples, that's all going to go up. So I'm going to put money in here and I'm going to get more dividends next quarter because their profits went up. And so, again, same information can come from the same place, but it's a whole different language because you haven't been groomed to understand what it means on the level that you're trying to go to. So you also have to look at how it was reinforced, because every reward you received, right? And we continue to do behavior that we're rewarded for. If you got high grades in school, right, for being a good citizen, high grades in school, you got immediate feedback by having a high grade, right? So you got an A on your paper or on your test, or you got immediate feedback, you got a D or an F, and then you had to make some adjustments. So the feedback was immediate and reinforced again that behavior. You got the same reinforcement when you on your job, right? And so if you're a good worker, a good laborer, you'll get a promotion, or you'll get more income, a raise, right? And so being a good laborer is also rewarded. So again, you strive to be a good laborer if you want to thrive in that environment. So all of that shaped your perspective on the world. And it doesn't mean that your perspective is not valid. It's valid on the level that you're at. And I'll give you an example. So I mentioned I was an educator. And when I was in school, one of the classes we had to take was child development. And they showed us drawings of 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. And all 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, when they showed them next to adults, the adults their bodies were going up disproportionately out, and they had huge heads, big, ginormous heads. But they drew kids in proportion, right? So if they drew themselves and they drew their sibling, they drew them with, symmetrical bodies with normal sized heads. For all the adults, the bodies went up on an angle and then they had a ginormous head. And so if you don't understand perspective, then you would tell a child that's wrong, because the child would say all adults have big heads. That's why I draw them that way. All adults are shaped that way. That's why I draw them that way. And from their perspective, that is true, because when they're looking up, when you look up, things look like they're expanding outward, and what's on top is ginormous. The same way if you're at the bottom of a building and you take a photo up, the building looks distorted as if it's going out. And so it's not that what they're seeing is not true from their perspective, but that would not serve them, right? If you're saying, I need you to understand human proportion, it would not serve them until you change their perspective. So you'd have to lift them up and put them eye to eye to an adult before they realize, oh, adults don't have ginormous heads. They have normal sized heads. And then you can teach perspective. So it is difficult to remain at the perspective that you are and try to get a grasp of going to the next level, because you haven't been there, because you haven't seen from that vantage point. And so your point of view is from the point of view of a laborer. And so even the laws that you advocate for, or the things that you get angry at, are totally different from if you were on another level, right? Like, I'm so upset that New York has the rule that you can no longer have short-term renters in an apartment building, right? So that pretty much effectively killed Airbnb and some other things, vacation rentals in New York City. But other people are happy because they say, well, there's a housing shortage and we need affordable housing. So if you're on that side of it, That is true, and from your perspective, valid. But if I'm an owner who wants to do what I want with my property and make as much money as I can from my property, then I'm mad at that, right? So two things can be true at the same time, but not serve each other, and that's what we have to understand. So the values, the perspective, the ideas that served you as a good laborer will not serve you if you're trying to get to the next level. And what's important for you to understand is that there are not one, not any transferable skills from that level to the next level. And I say to people all the time, what gets you to one level won't keep you on that level, and what keeps you on that level won't get you to the next level. And so it's a whole new perspective that's necessary, a whole new language that's necessary, a whole new set of skills that are necessary for you to ascend. And so the mistake that I realized I was making before was I was giving the skills and not ensuring that people can look at those skills from a different vantage point. And so what my goal is now is to change that. So what you're going to get from today's workshop is how wealth and freedom is initially built from a different vantage point, right? So not from the vantage point. I want to take you from the vantage point that you are and steer you and help you see it from another vantage point. And one skill that I failed to teach people in the past, because it's funny, sometimes you assume people can pick up the rest from there. But it's one skill to be able to make money. It's a whole different skill to be able to keep that same money, right? And you probably heard me say many times, I didn't care before because for some egotistical reason, I thought I had the Midas touch. I was like, I don't care, ride until the wheels fall off and I just keep making more money. But you get exhausted doing that. It doesn't make sense. And as you get older, that's not really a winning strategy. So one of the skills I developed over the last 20 years after, and some of you don't know this part of my story, I made millions really fast. So I left my job in 2004. By 2008, I was a millionaire. So within 4 years, I had a net worth well over $1 million, well over $1 million, a few $1 million. By 2010, I had negative net worth. So I gained and then lost multi-millions of dollars within a 6-year period, right? So it took me 4 or 5 years to build it. It all came crashing down within about 2 years. And then I had to, it taught me a lot of things because I didn't realize how I made it, really. I thought, again, it was just my genius, and it was more luck than genius because I learned in retrospect, after doing what we call a postmortem, after dissecting it, after it was gone, how I actually made it and why, which allowed me then to understand how to build it again, even further than where I was before. But then when we had these shocks in the system, because before the shock was the Great Recession, I had 7 businesses operating, multiple pieces of real estate. I lost everything, all at once. I was living off my credit cards. To building it all back up and greater than what I had before. And then when we had a shock, to become what I call anti-fragile, and Nicholas Nassim Taleb, he coined it, he made the term famous, anti-fragile. It's not being resilient to shocks in the system, it's thriving in shocks in the system. So when a lot of people were struggling during COVID, I actually made more money during COVID than I ever did. And it allowed me to have the time to really see a lot of things that I had missed before. So I don't think I've done a live workshop since pre-COVID. I'm sure I haven't, but it allowed me that time to step away and reanalyze what I'm offering people. And to, again, if you're taking the financial freedom class, which I believe still today is a great class, this adds the prequel and the sequel, right? So this is what you have to do before to be able to take advantage of that. And once you've got that, this is what you need to do after. So we're going to start really simply because we only have a little bit of time. And we're going to deal with the 4 most important concepts and understand it again from a different perspective. So we're just going to deal with income, assets, wealth, and financial freedom. And for a lot of people, they'll see that wealth part is something new in terms of what I was teaching, because my whole focus was financial freedom, financial freedom, financial freedom. But a lot of people I realize don't necessarily want financial freedom, but pretty much everybody wants wealth. And we're going to get into the definitions of that, and then you'll understand it shortly. So let's just deal with that. So let's talk about income. So income from a financial perspective is all the money that you receive regularly, not special occasions, all the money you receive regularly during a given month from working, business, investments, or other sources used to fund your expenses. Everybody knows what expenses are. Those are those things you have to pay. So that's what income is. So what does that translate to most people? Income means money. Income means money. But here's where perspective creates the problem. You've been trained to work for money without really getting an understanding of what money is and what the value of money is and its limitations. So money is merely a medium of exchange for goods and services, meaning instead of me trading or bartering, a goat for a cow, or, some carrots for a pair of pants, where it's hard to derive an equivalency in value or even something that somebody else wants. Money has been used as the medium of exchange, so it has a perceived value, and you exchange that for goods and services. Most of you have been taught your whole life to work for money, right? You go to work so you get money. You sell something so you get money. Everything you do is driven by the desire to have money. But what people don't understand is that once money is earned, and that which is not used immediately begins to lose value the moment it's not used. And I know that's a hard thing for people to fathom, because you would love to save money, to store money. But the only purpose for storing money would be if the purchasing power you had today transferred over time. So later on, you could buy the same amount of goods and services with the same amount of money. But we've all heard of the term inflation. And maybe it didn't mean much to you before. Maybe you looked at it as the cost of goods going up, but didn't connect that to, that means the purchasing power of your money just went down, right? That's the relationship. If the cost of goods and services go up, that means the purchasing power of the same amount of money went down. So when they say the value of your money, we're not talking about on a foreign currency exchange. Like, get off of TikTok, by the way. Who cares about the value of money against the dinar or whatever? Like, who cares? It's how much purchasing power you have for the money that you earned over time. And we know that the mandate of you may not know. The mandate of the Federal Reserve is to keep inflation between 2 and 4%. Right? So that means annual. That means I don't care how great the economy is. If the economy is super great, you're going to have inflation of 2 to 4% annually. When it's bad, it will go up higher. Like last year, it was super bad. It was really high. So that means the purchasing power of your money that's stored diminishes. So if you've been only taught to make money and to save money, then you've already been taught a losing strategy. If you didn't spend every dime, then you're already losing. So it's always interesting to me. People say, oh, millionaires, that means you have $1 million in cash. Anybody who has $1 million in cash is a fool. And it means they do not understand money. Because money that's kept in cash loses value every single day. So if you have cash, you have to do something with it. Most people don't want to hold it anyway. They just spend it. And the more cash they get, the more they spend. And I'll give you a perfect example. During COVID, most of America got stimulus checks. And when the economy was shut down, we had a record high in personal savings. More people saved during COVID than they had in decades. Extremely, large numbers of people. The moment the economy opened up, all that money was gone. All the money that was in the banks disappeared. And I'm going to tell you the crazy thing about that is that was the time to save the money, because when we had inflation, one of the mandates, again, of the Federal Reserve is to keep the inflation rate at 2 to 4%. The mechanism by which they do that is to raise interest rates so that people will stop spending with borrowed money. So people stop spending, right? If you had kept that money in the bank, you would have got a higher return on the money, free money in the bank. But instead, the vast majority of people who got that stimulus money, as soon as they had the opportunity, spent it. So again, it's a perspective thing, right? Free money means spend the money. Instead of free money means, okay, if inflation is high and they're going to raise the interest rates, if I save it, I'll make money from that free money. Different perspective. So let's just look at income, because again, most people derive the income from only a couple of ways, right? So they'll either have earned income, right, which is a job. They'll have profit income, meaning they'll have a little side hustle where they sell something, and rental income if they own a piece of property. They happen to be lucky to own a piece of property. So those are pretty much the three ways that most people get income. But there are a lot of ways to get income. Most people are totally unaware of the variety of ways that exist to make income. So I color-coded these in a certain way. And I put red and green because hopefully that stimulates something in you about stop and go, right? But every income stream is valid. I just want to make sure you understand that. But it's different how they're generated. So we have what we call earned income, profit income, and capital gains. And the reason I put those in red is because those are all what we call active income, right? So earned income, profit income, and capital gains is all active income. Then we have business income, interest income, dividend income, rental income, and royalty income. All of those income streams are what we call passive income. So let's look at what the difference is. So when we look at the active income streams, they're all based on the way we're wired, right? The way we went back. Effort and time, right? Effort over time equals income. So earned income comes from wages, right? If you have a job, tips, commissions, and also if you're an independent contractor. I know some people, I'm not a W-2 wage earner, you're a W-9 wage earner. It's still earned income. If you're a sole proprietor, it's still earned income, right? Because you don't change your tax structure. That's ordinary active income. So earned income is having a job, getting tips, the gig economy, mom and pop store, self-employed. Those things are earned income, meaning if you work, you eat. You don't work, you don't eat. One-to-one exchange. Then we have profit income. And it's interesting, I hear people say, I'm an independent business owner. Profit income is still work. So profit income means you either buy something wholesale and sell it retail, or you manufacture something at whatever cost and sell it for a higher price. That's profit income. If you don't sell it, you don't eat, right? So it's the same thing. It's an exchange of effort for money, effort over time for money. Then we have capital gains, which is very similar to profit income. The difference is capital gains is for things that are considered investments, right? And so if you flip houses, you buy it at one price and you flip it. Well, they say flip means to sell it at a higher price. The difference between what you paid for it and what you sold it for is capital gains. It's the same thing if you have collectibles, right? If you sell collectibles, you buy it at one price, you sell it for another. It's a capital gain. The difference is the capital gain. So all those things require continuous effort. That's why they call it active income. If you stop doing it, you flip one house, I don't care how much money you make, there's no more money coming in from that real estate. You got to go find another house to flip. Even if you got a big chunk of change from it, that's going to run out and you're going to have to go flip another house. So all those are the active income examples. And The skills you have that you learn in earned income do translate there, right? So it's easy for you to transition into being self-employed because it's pretty much the same thing, your effort and outcome. Same thing with flipping properties, right? Your effort and outcome. So these skills are interchangeable. The issue with active income is over time, as you get older, you lose both the desire and the ability to make money off of your own efforts, right? And so as you age, you don't want to continuously give up, even if it's cognitive labor, you don't want to continuously give up labor and time, because you have to give up labor and time to get in exchange for money, right? So the older you get, that desire and ability wanes over time. And then we have the passive income streams, and it's a little small, that's income. So we have in the passive income stream, we have business income, and some of you are probably saying, what is the difference between business income and profit income? So profit income is and earned income as a self-employed person is you're doing all the work, right? And so you have a business where you do the marketing, you do the manufacturing, you do the sales, you do the customer service, you do the bookkeeping, you do everything pretty much in the business. And so you're a small operation. This is you, and maybe you got a helper or two here and there. Business income means that you have a vision, you have a system, you have the ideas, and other people drive that for you. Meaning, somebody handles the customer service, somebody handles products and deliveries, and you have a team of people. And it doesn't mean they're your employees, right? Because you can outsource all those things, but you have a vision and other people drive that vision forward, and you get income from their labor. And it doesn't mean you don't do anything, but you don't do the bulk of the work. Other people do the bulk of the work. So it leaves you free to work on the business and not in the business. And if you step away, you can go on vacation and that system is still running and money's still being generated. You can retire and sit home and money is still going to be generated. So business income is not self-employment. And that's usually you create a corporate structure. So corporation or an LLC, and you have systems and you have people working for you and they drive your vision. Then we have interest income. So interest income is generated from you lending your money. And it's interesting, you've been on the losing side of that pretty much your whole life. You put money in the bank, what does the bank do? The bank invests your money. You buy insurance, what does the insurance company do? Even if they tell you that crappy cashback garbage, you give insurance company your money, what do? They go invest your money. You get a credit card, they extend you credit. They extend you credit and you pay them back interest, right? So you've been on the wrong side of that your entire life, and you can flip that around and be on the right side of that. So interest income is when you lend, and it can be through the form of peer-to-peer lending, crowdfunding, bonds, private loans. The list goes on and on and on and on. And I'm going to give you concrete examples of everything and how to do it a little later, but I want you to understand the concepts first. And I think that's what I missed before. I was telling you how to do stuff and you didn't understand the nuances, and so it became a little more difficult. Then we have what we call dividend income. So dividend income is interesting to me. Most people who delve into the stock market look for capital gains because, again, those skills, like I said, are interchangeable. Earned income, profit income, and capital gains. And so people go into the stock market and want to trade. Trade is active income, right? And so you try to buy a stock at one price and sell it at another, but then you don't own the asset anymore, right? So it doesn't make sense to me. I only buy stocks that pay me dividends. And what is a dividend? Every quarter, the company takes a portion of its earnings and gives it to its shareholders. And so every quarter, every stock I own, every quarter they pay me money, right? Based on the amount of shares that I own, they send me a percentage of their profits and they give me money. So I'm getting paid to own a part of a company as opposed to just looking for capital gains or I buy it at this price and hope I can sell it to somebody else at a higher price. That's not a winning strategy over the long term. Can you make money doing that? Absolutely. Can you keep money doing that? No. Can you continuously make money from it? No. Right. And so we have to look at dividend income again as part of our greater portfolio. Then we have rental income. So rental income, most people think of rental income as real estate. Of course, you can get rental income from real estate, but you can get rental income from renting anything that somebody would pay you for. Some of you have bought expensive cameras. You can rent your camera equipment. Some of you have, I don't know, a bicycle that you don't use, a car that you don't use all the time, a garage space you don't use. There's so many things, any type of equipment, any type of transportation, any type of dwelling, all these things can get you rental income. And so tools, equipment, technology, anything you can imagine that other people don't want permanently or don't want to pay the price for because the price to own is too great or the liability is too great, you can rent. And so rental income, again, should be a part of your income streams. And then there's royalty income. And again, I'm going to tell you how to do all this a little. I just want you to understand the different types of income. Royalty income is the money you get when somebody uses your intellectual property, right? So if you sell your intellectual property, so for instance, I have a book that I wrote, and when people buy it, the publishing company gets their money. It's like almost like dividends, and then I get my money, which you call royalties, right? So every quarter, I get a check based on how many people bought the book. So that means I did the work once, and the rest money comes in quarterly. You can do royalties for books, songs, photos, videos, systems. You can license systems that you have. Like, there's so many ways to get royalty income as well. So let me go back for a second. Most people get their income, again, in 1, 2, maybe 3 ways. And you want to have multiple streams of income. Right? You want to get money coming in from a lot of ways. And even if you're doing active income, you should have passive income streams also. So if you have passive income streams, it's not based on your effort, it's based on time, right? As these things mature and they get better over time, you get more and more money from them after doing pretty much a hard effort maybe once, and then maintenance efforts periodically. So let's just talk about an asset, and then we'll move on to how to take advantage of all these things. So an asset is technically any property that you own that has value that you could sell and make money. But we're going to talk about the bigger assets, and we're going to talk about asset classes. So we're not going to talk about your camera equipment as an asset, even though it can be an asset. We're not going to get that fine-tuned with it. We're going to talk about some of the bigger things that you may be familiar with. So in the asset category, there are 3 types of assets that we want to deal with. There are what we call equity-producing assets, income-producing assets, and assets to provide both equity and income. So now I know I lost a whole bunch of you, because what is equity? Equity is basically capital gains, meaning the difference between what you owe or paid for something and what its market value is currently. So it's easy to see with a house. If I buy a house at 100,000 and then 5 years later it's worth 150,000, even if I still owed 100,000 on it, it's $50,000 in equity, right? That's the difference between what it's worth and what is owed. In that same instance, if I'm paying down the debt on it, let's say, so I bought it at 100,000, I paid off 25,000 over 5 years, and it went up in value 50,000, then the equity becomes 75,000. Because again, it's a difference between what it's worth and what I owe on it. So if I owe nothing and it continues to go up, then it's just pure equity, 100% equity, right? It means if I paid 100,000 for it, but I owe nothing, and it went up to 150,000, then it's $150,000 worth of equity. So I, in general, don't go after assets that just produce equity. So again, we talk about stocks. I don't buy stocks that I hope go up in value over time but don't pay me, because then I have to time it right. And the only way for me to extract, well, it's 2 ways really, to extract the value from it. The first way is I have to sell it, right? So I sell it, but then what am I stuck with? Cash. I told you earlier, I don't want cash. I never want cash. The only cash I want is enough cash to pay my expenses. After that, all cash should go into assets. So if I sell the asset and then I have cash, then I'm losing. And again, I have to time it right in order to get any value. And I might have to wait 20 years, 30 years before I get any income from it. So that's a long time to have your money parked into an asset. The other way to extract value from an equity producing asset is to borrow against the asset. So if you had a brokerage account where you had stocks that were worth something, a brokerage would lend you money against the value of the stocks. If you have a piece of real estate, then a bank would lend you money against the value of the real estate. They call it refinancing, right? Or taking out an equity line of credit. So you can extract some value from assets that only gain in equity, but why would you rely on that? Because again, if you sell it, then you lost the asset completely and you have to do something with the cash. If you borrow against it, now you lost equity because you took the equity out in cash. And if you're not, and there's a cost of borrowing that. So if you're not making more money on the money you borrowed than the cost of servicing the new debt you just created, then it's a mistake. So there's equity producing assets like land can produce equity if you're not growing anything on or building on it. An abandoned property, again, stocks that don't pay dividends, so like the tech stocks and things like that. There are things that in some businesses create equity, but then they have income producing assets. So when we look at income producing assets, then we're talking about things that generate money, right? And so there are some stocks that pay me a dividend, but they're not really increasing in terms of capital appreciation or value, right? Their stock price has been pretty steady for a long time, but they pay me dividends. That's an income producing asset. There are other income producing assets that even depreciate in value. It could be a vehicle that you're using for work. It could be a business. A business is an asset that doesn't necessarily increase in value, but it produces income. So you have some income producing assets. And then we have what I think are the best are assets that provide both equity and income. So again, dividend stocks that grow in appreciation, real estate that increases in value, businesses that increase in value if you want to sell it and produce revenue. Those things are, to me, the best types of assets to put into your portfolio. So if we look at the asset classes, right, you're talking about securities, business, collectibles, intellectual property, real estate. Some people include cash, but again, I don't, because cash, we already know, depreciates in value every minute it's in your pocket. So when we look at securities, we're talking about stocks, bonds, loans, real estate investment trusts, mutual funds, exchange traded funds. And don't worry about the names of those right now, but you need to learn them eventually. Business is an asset, but I'm not talking about self-employment or multi-level marketing. Those are not, you are an employee or an independent contractor if you're doing that. Collectibles, precious metals, art, nostalgic items like baseball cards, comic books, things like that. We know NFTs are in the toilet right now, and I said they were going to be garbage when they came out in 2021. Intellectual property is an asset class, so your books, videos, pictures, workshops, courses, music, art, that's all intellectual property. Real estate, whether you're talking about commercial, residential, or land, or that's part of an asset class. So those are the asset classes. And why is that important? We can skip this one. So why is that important? Because you determine wealth by the number of assets that you have. So when we talk about net worth, right? Net worth is the total value of your assets minus, again, your debt or your liabilities. So the more assets that you have in terms of the value, right? We're talking about equity value, the higher your net worth is, and the easier it is to transfer to the next generation, meaning you can transfer wealth from one generation to the next. Right? And I say that in opposition to financial freedom. Financial freedom is more about preserving your time than the value of your assets. So financial freedom means your passive income that's derived from assets, your passive income that's derived from assets meets your expenses. And I like to take that a step further, the expenses of a lifestyle that you designed, right? Because again, we're used to living backwards. We used to get income and then design a lifestyle based on the amount of income we get. And when we're talking about being financially free, we design the lifestyle and only choose the assets that will pay us the income to support the lifestyle that we choose. So financial freedom, although the passive income is covering your expenses, is not transferable to the next generation. Wealth, which is the value of assets against liability, is transferable to the next generation. So ultimately, financial freedom is great, but financial freedom without wealth serves you and not those you care for or the causes that you care for after you're gone. And that might be okay. You might be okay with that. When you go, you just take everything with you as long as you're living the life that you want. But if that's important to you, because I hear people say intergenerational wealth can only come from the transfer of assets from one generation to the next. And we don't want to transfer cash because, again, the mindset of having cash means just to spend it. And the mindset and the value of cash diminishes over time. So when we're talking about creating a great lifestyle for yourself, you want assets that can be transferred for the next generation, but you want income from those assets. That's why I say income and equity producing assets is best. But you want income from those assets to be able to support the lifestyle of your choosing, especially as you get older and no longer want active income because you want your time completely back, right? And when you come to grips with your own mortality, when you get a little older and you realize you probably have more years behind you than you have left in front of you, time becomes super precious. And if you haven't created an infrastructure, meaning you haven't built up the assets and their values over the time you were generating the earned income, it would be difficult to do that with the time you have left, right? And so it's critically important that you don't wait and you start now. So I'm going to teach you the fast track to being able to acquire the assets really quickly. And you've probably heard the term leverage before. And when we talk about leverage, I don't know if you paid attention in science class, but there's a little image here where you have a load, you have a fulcrum, and you have a lever. And the longer the lever, the less effort it takes to move a bigger load. And so leverage is a scientific term, but it's used in finance to say you use little effort to get a greater outcome. And so that means that we have to figure out how to use, and again, we're wired for this, to use the least amount of effort on our own to get the greatest outcome in the fastest time. That's what leverage is in a nutshell. So I have a formula that I've created, and those of you who've been around me know my formula, but I have a formula that I created that will give you the leverage that you need to be on a fast track to be able to accumulate assets really quickly. Now, this is the part where we talk about making money, right? And so I told you I mastered the making money really quickly. After I tell you how to make money, because this part will be familiar to some people who've been around me for a long time, very new, I'm sure, to the people who haven't. After this, I'm going to tell you how to preserve money and then make money grow, which will be new to probably a lot of you. So my formula is really simple. OPM plus OPI plus OPR plus OPW plus OPE equals OP5. OP5 equals faster success. And that's all I have for free. No, I'm just kidding. So we have to figure out what this mathematical equation is. And once we understand it, and we'll see how foreign it is to, again, the way we've been raised, if you implement every piece of it, so it's not OPM plus OPE equals OP5. No, it's not OPI plus, it's OPM plus OPI plus OPR plus OPW plus OPE. There's 5 elements of it. And you have to use all 5 to get the best outcome. If you use 1 or 2, you might not get any outcome that you desire. If you use 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 2, 3, and 4, you might get a smaller outcome than you desire. If you want it fast and you want it powerfully and you want it scaled magnificently, you have to use the full formula. So let's look at what these OPs are. So OP we know is other people's, right? And no, OPP is not there because that's not going to get you what you want. But let's look at this. OPM is other people's money. OPI is other people's ideas. OPR is other people's resources. OPW is other people's work. And OPE is other people's experience. So if we use that formula, and I know that sounds crazy to people, when OPM was first taught to me by a very wealthy person, the way it was explained to me is you don't take a risk and pay for it too. And that blew my mind because I was always taught, I was always raised not to risk anybody else's money. Like, why would you put somebody else's money at risk? And I know it's not sitting well with a lot of you, but you don't understand how the system works. I'm not saying risk your friend's money because your friends don't know how the system works. But if you're doing OPM properly, nobody stands to lose. Because the way the system is designed to work, and it's the reason banks will take a risk on you, the reason credit card companies will take a risk on you. So some of you have missed your credit card payments and got phone calls from credit card company. And they tell you after you haven't paid, you don't want this to be charged off, do you? And you get scared. You're like, oh no, charge off. And again, you don't understand the language. Oh no, I don't want to charge off on my credit report. Not understanding what charge off means for the credit card company. To charge it off means that it is an uncollectible debt, which they then charge off or write off on their taxes. So they get a tax deduction for every loss. They don't lose. On top of that, they can still have the right to sell the debt or go after you for the debt, even though they've already written it off on their taxes. And so they have the ability to get paid from it twice. That's usually why they sell it to a third party for pennies on the dollar, and that company comes after you and offers you to sell for pennies on what you owe, but a little more than what they bought it for. And so if you understand that that's how the system works, and banks do the same thing, right? So if a bank lends you money for a property and you don't pay it, they have a right to foreclose on the property, and they sell it at auction for whatever they can get for it, and the difference they charge off. They never lose. And so when it was taught to me, if you take a risk, you don't pay for it too. You borrow the money from somebody else. You take a risk on creating something. If it doesn't work, no big deal. They'll write it off because that's the game they play. You're playing a different part of that game. And if you try to play both sides of the game and don't understand that side of the game, you will lose because you don't know you can charge it off, right? And so it's important that you begin to understand that there's money out there, there's money available. And when I say there's money available from institutions, there's money available from other people, there's money available from the government, there's money available from international sources. There's more money available today than there has ever been. There's money available from crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending. There's more money available today than there has ever been in world history from more sources, and easier to get, easier to qualify for, even if you have no experience, poor credit, and all these other things. Will you get the most favorable terms? No, but there's money available. So if you take the risk, you shouldn't pay for it too. That's number one. Number two, your return on investment will always be greater if you use other people's money. And I know that concept return on investment is foreign to you because you're used to, again, exchange of labor for money, exchange of labor for money, exchange of labor for money. No, when I invest, I look for what's the return I'll get on my investment. And the return I'm looking for on my investment has to beat the inflation rate, right? So if the inflation rate is 4%, for my money to grow, I have to be able to beat the 4% and whatever taxes I would pay on that. So I'm looking at 10% or better, right? And again, you have to learn to manage your expectations. I hear people tell me all the time, yeah, I'm gonna get this money. I want you to help me flip it. Flip it? You mean 100% return? If you're not selling drugs, I don't know where you're gonna get that, especially in the time frame you're looking at. Can you get 100% return? Yeah, but over a long period of time. It doesn't work that way. You're not working for the money. It's doing something. It's working for you, and it doesn't flip itself. It doesn't just flip over and flip over. It doesn't work that way. It's not how money is made. Wealth is derived over time, little effort, long time, as opposed to, again, that immediate feedback. Totally different. And the wealth does what we call compounds. So it needs time to compound. So your return on investment will always be greater if you use other people's money. So I'll give you an example. If an investment is giving me, well, I shouldn't say giving me, if an investment on their prospectus, right, it says it's year to date, it's been a 20% return on investment, right? So if I put $1,000 in it in a year at 20%, it gives me $200 gain, right? $200 gain, that represents 20% return, right? So at the end of the year, it's $1,200. If I use my $1,000 and gains are always accrued annually, so interest, returns, always accrued annually, that means my $1,000 is tied up for an entire year. My $1,000 is tied up for an entire year for me to get the $200 at the end of the year. So if I borrowed the $1,000, I borrowed $1,000 at, say, 7% interest, right? Because that's way more than most people get. You can get a high interest savings account at 4.5%, CD at 5%. You know, it'd be extremely rare for somebody to get 7%. But let's say you offer somebody 7% for $1,000. So you borrowed $1,000, you put it into the investment that you know is going to get 20% at the end of the year. At the end of the year, you pay them their 7% back. So that 7% represents $70. So you give them $70, you keep $130. All right, so I'm going to let you unmute if you know the answer to this. And not if you took my class before. If you didn't take my class before, if you borrow at 7% and you give them $70, you keep $130, as opposed to keeping the $200 and you would add 20%, what's your new return on investment? Don't be scared. I know this is investor math. Somebody, anybody? Scared to answer it? Okay, so one of the things that, all right, if you've ever done a consultation with me, you know I ask more questions than I give answers. And the reason I do that is to get your brain thinking so that you can start rewiring the way you think and the way you look at things. So you come up with solutions instead of me just telling you what to do and you're not understanding. So let me go over that again. Return on investment, simple concept. If I invest $1,000 for a year and it generates either interest or capital appreciation or whatever, and it gains $200 in value, that $200 represents my return. As a percentage, $200 is 20% of 1,000. So that means I got a 20% return on investment. So if I use my $1,000 and I put it in there and I leave it there for a year, a 20% return is a very good return for me doing nothing. It's 20% return on investment. That's a great return. But I said OPM. So if you borrow $1,000 at 7% from somebody else, because you gotta borrow at cheaper than you're gonna make. That makes sense. If I borrow at 7%, it's gonna cost me $70 to borrow that. But I don't have to pay them the $70 or pay back $1,000 till the end of the year. So I put it in this investment. It generates the $200 in growth. I subtract the $70 and I give it to them, and I have $130 left. So if I had $200 for my own money, that represented 20% return on investment. What does $130 represent now in that $1,000 of somebody else's money for me? Because I keep the 130 and I give them the 70. So somebody typed in, let's see. Somebody said 13%. So does anybody who hasn't taken my class disagree with that? Oh, I got another 13%. 13%, 13%, 13%. Okay. So you guys are using the math that is human nature math, right? That's human nature math, right? And so I expected you to come up with 13. So now, and I think most people were thinking 13, but they were scared to come up with the answer. So now let me reframe your thinking to the way an investor thinks. Because I'm glad you guys said 13, because that would be the common answer for the vast majority of people. It's way better than 13%, because here's the difference. Because we're looking at my return on investment. If I put my $1,000 in, you guys understand, if I tied my $1,000 up for a whole year, and I got 20, and it got a 20% growth, then and I keep the 200, that 200 represents 20%. That's clear. What's unclear is how I say it's more than 13%, right? Because you're doing simple math. You're like, okay, guard at 7, that's 70. Okay, 130 is 13% of 1,000. That's correct. 130 is 13% of 1,000, but that's not my return on investment. How much money did I put in of my own money? I put in 0. So it's not my money working for me. It's somebody else's money working for me. So when you talk about my return on investment, based on my sacrifice, my contribution, my effort, which was 0, I tied up nothing for a whole year. So from 0 of my own money, I got $130. Putting in 0 of my money and getting $130 is far greater return than if I put in $1,000 and got $200 back. So if I put in 0 and I got back 130, it's incalculable. That's an infinite return. And so when we think about getting returns on our investments, we always want to get a greater return. I will always get a greater return if I use somebody else's money than if I use my own, because my money will be tied up for an entire year trying to work for me, instead of my money going someplace else, right? Probably supporting the lifestyle I want to live, while I use other people's money to make more money for myself. So it's better for me to take the $130 on somebody else's money than take the $200 tying up my own. Now my money can be redistributed and make money someplace else. So it's an infinite return, and you'll always do better using somebody else's money. Especially, now you got to consider too, if you're trying to buy a house, and let's say the house costs $100,000, and you decide, I don't want to have a mortgage. I'm going to save $100,000. Let's even say $200,000. I'm going to save $200,000, and I'm going to pay it all in cash because I don't want a mortgage. But it's an investment property. And I'm talking about your home. Your home is not an investment, by the way. Your home can be an asset, but it's not an investment. So I'm going to save $200,000. Wait, somebody had a question. Yes, correct, Celia. So I save $200,000 and I buy a property, and now I have one property that's worth $200,000. When I could have gone to the bank, and if the bank says, well, you got to have some skin in the game, you got to put down 20%. 20% is $40,000, right? So now, if I still had to say I had $200,000, I put down $40,000, and now I have a property worth $200,000, right? So I spend $40,000 to get $200,000 of value, and I'm still going to get the income from that property, and the income will pay off the loan. Now that leaves me with $180,000. So that means I could buy 5 of those for the same amount of money. So now if I put $40,000 down on 5 properties, now I got $1 million worth of properties for $200,000, generating the income that's not only going to pay off the cost of the debt, the cost of the loan, the mortgage, but also put 5 times as much money in my pocket. And so you'll always do better using other people's money. That's how America goes round, but that's not the only time we use other people's money is a credit card, pretty much, or, you know, if we want to buy a car or other things that depreciate in value. A home, like your home sometimes can appreciate, but doesn't give you income. So you've been doing it for the wrong reasons, but you are afraid to do it for the right reasons. It's really bizarre. Or you don't know the places to get that money. But there are venture capitalists and hard money lenders and private lenders and angel investors and crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lenders. There's so much money. There's so much money out there for whatever it is that you're trying to do. That it doesn't make sense not to tap into that. You're doing it the hard way, the struggle way, the wrong way, if you're trying to save your earned income enough to be able to invest and do these type of things or start a business. Let's just talk about other people's ideas. So it takes 10,000 hours, they say, to master something. It takes 10,000 hours to master something. And there are a lot of elements that need to be mastered for you to really do well, right? So I've been doing this money making thing on a high level for 20 years. And so I have a level of mastery in certain areas, but there's certain areas I don't because I didn't put in the 20 years into that or the 10,000 hours into that. So why would I then say, oh, I got to spend another 10,000 hours here and another 10,000? No, there's a lot of legal work that needs to be done. I'm not putting 10,000 hours into legal work. I'm going to hire a lawyer. There's 10,000 hours that need to be put into the best tax strategy. I have a tax strategist who's been doing it for 60 years almost. I'm going to go to my tax strategist who's been doing it for 60 years. I'm not going to take the time to do all these things. I'm going to use their ideas because they have a mastery of certain things. And so it's about putting a team together when in school you were not encouraged to work with others on their ideas. You were taught to do your own work, not to look at somebody else's paper, not to collaborate and work with others. You had to come up with your own solutions as opposed to collaboration. So the name of the game for success on this level is not individual effort, but collaborative efforts and collaborative ideas. It can go even further. And I'll give you examples when we talk about how to make money with this strategy. There are people who have phenomenal ideas and can't do anything with it. But you're maybe a strategist or you're a detailer or you have some other skill and you can collaborate with them or you can buy their ideas or you can use an idea that they already created. You can do these things and make plenty of money with it. So stop thinking you have to come up with the whole idea and every part of it. There are people who already have an expertise in certain areas and you just have to, bring them together, whether you pay them or you offer them some equity in the business or whatever it is, or you exchange, barter skills and services, but you have to bring in other people's ideas. The same thing with other people's resources. Somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows just about everybody and can find just about anything, right? So if the average person in their close network, not just social networks, some of you got like 5,000 friends on social media and you never even met, 4,500 of them, right? But the average person has a real relationship with about 250 people. So if you just do the math, those 250 people know 250 people. If you multiply that, that's 62,500 people in your network because you knew those 250 people. So like I said, you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, and that 62,500 group network, especially if some of them are on a level beyond where you're at, you have access to whatever resources they have. And I tell people that all the time. I'm not stingy with my resources. I consider myself a connector. If I know somebody who can hook you up with something, I'm going to connect you because it takes nothing away from me. It only adds value to my relationship with you and the other person if it's a good meet. So I do it all the time. My resources are your resources, and hopefully it goes both ways. And so you have a huge network, but part of the issue is we've been taught to be reticent, right? Not to speak about the things that we're trying to do for some fear that somebody's going to destroy your dream. If you share with people and they try to destroy your dream, that's not the circle you need to be in. But you need to let people know everything you're trying to do because you'd be surprised who has access to what and what resources. So don't worry about trying to gather all the resources yourself. And today, it's so easy because all the collective resources in the world are on your phone and your computer. All you got to do is do a search, right? And so You can use Google's resources by tapping into that huge database that is created. Other people's work. This one is hard for people because, again, you've been taught to do the work. You've been taught that you can be self-made, and the greater your effort, the more you get. And actually, the greater your effort, just the more depleted you get, and the less you can spread yourself into other areas of need. And so you usually diminish the outcome of what you're trying to do. You will never really truly understand other people's work until you place a value on what you bring to the table. And so I always like to tell a story about when I first started doing business consulting. I had a client, and he had actually a branch of a mortgage bank. And this is back in the days when real estate was booming before the crisis hit before. And he wanted to take his business from a high six-figure business to a seven-figure plus business. And I'm good at analyzing what's wrong, and I'm good at creating strategies to overcome those things. I call it the workaround. I'm good at coming up with workarounds for all kinds of things that could impact what you're doing. And so I went home, I analyzed his business, I created this big plan and how to get implemented, and I pitched it to him. I presented it for him. And I used to be afraid to ask for the money because I didn't really understand the value that I was bringing to the table. And all my peers would tell me, oh, well, you don't charge enough, man. You need to charge way more. You're giving value. And I'm like, I was just kind of scared, right? And so when I pitched it to him, in my mind, before I left my house, I was like, okay, I usually ask for about, $5,000 for something like this. But I'm going to ask him for 10. I'm going to ask him for 10. I'm going to be bold, ask him for $10,000. So I pitched him the idea, and he was super excited. I could see it all over his face. See it on his face. And he said, all right, so how much is it going to cost me? And I said, $30,000. He said, is that it? And I could have kicked myself. Right. So I understood at that moment what my value is. And once I understood my value, I realized I was wasting time if I was spending time and labor on things that were worth less than my time and my skill. And so I said to myself, I am no longer doing minimum wage work. So when I went home, and my backyard used to have, I got artificial grass now, but I used to have high grass. I used to have a lawnmower. I told my wife, I ain't mowing the lawn no more because that's minimum wage work. I'm going to hire somebody to do it because during that time I would have been mowing the lawn. I could be making so much money because that's what my time is really worth. And she said, that's a brilliant idea. I'm not cleaning the house anymore either. And no kidding, from that point on, we hired a housekeeper. Why? Because our time is worth more than what we would have been spending doing that. And because we use that time to make more money, right? So my wife ended up starting a business is thriving. She didn't have to worry about cleaning the house and doing some of the manual chores that most of us are overly concerned with. So that translates into your business also. Like, why would you be the one making photocopies or doing some of the stuff that an intern can do or a low-wage worker can do, or an apprentice can do? Why would you do that when you should be focused on the bigger things where your skill set lies? But at the same time, it goes back to what I was talking about before. Where you're not adept at certain things, why would you not hire a professional who can guide you through what you're trying to do? So it makes sense to use other people's work. And then other people's experience, same thing. It's almost the same thing as other people's work. If somebody put in the time already, they can steer you around the pitfalls and boost you up over the hurdles and all these other things, which saves you time, energy, effort, heartache, loss, disaster possibly. They can save you from all those things and, again, fast track you to success. So you want to be able to use all those things. And so I'll just give you a quick example of how I use that. So I told you I made my first millions really fast. And one of the things that I was able to do, and this is Airbnb is actually a spinoff of what we had back in the days. we had hostels in New York, and I had actually the number one hostel in New York. So let me tell you how it happened. So partner and I, we had a property that we sold in Brooklyn, brownstone, two-family brownstone. But at the time, we could never figure out how to really make good money from it. So it didn't make sense to hold on to it because it wasn't income producing to the level that we wanted. So we had resources tied up in something that wasn't producing the outcome we wanted. And so we sold it. So he called me and he said, "You remember that property on Jefferson?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Man, this guy's got a hostel in there and he's making a whole lot of money every single month." Right? And I forget the amount he was telling me. For the time, it was a lot. Today, you probably say it wasn't much, but maybe he was making maybe $6,000 to $7,000 a month profit. Right? He was making $6,000 to $7,000 a month. And I was like, what? We couldn't make, we were barely breaking even. Forget profit. We were barely breaking even on it. So maybe we made a couple $100 profit. This guy's making $6,000 to $7,000 profit every single month. And I was like, well, how's he doing that? And he said, this guy got a hostel in there. And the name of the hostel back then was called Loftel. And I was like, hostel? What in the heck is a hostel? I didn't know they even had those in America. I always thought those are backpackers in Europe and they stay in a hostel, but I had never heard of a hostel in America, let alone in New York. So I went online and I looked up Loftel and I looked at his business, and this guy was booked up for the next 3 months. So it's, for those who don't know, a hostel is a vacation rental, but it's a communal, right? You share rooms and have like beds, bunk beds pretty much, and people share the living space. And it's usually young travelers, usually from Europe and Asia, who like to commune when they travel and stay with new people. So this guy was booked up for several weeks. So I was like, wow, that's crazy, because we have a huge building, a 4-story brownstone, and I'm doing the math. If we have enough beds, we can make $20,000 a month in here. So somebody else's idea, right? Clearly it was the other guy's idea, because we would have never thought of doing a hospital, right? And then, you know, of course we did our research, and there, at the time, there was a 10,000 bed per day demand for hospitals in New York City, and not enough hospitals to service the amount of demand. And at the time, tourism was increasing. And there was a whole lot of things going on in the economy, that in the European economy, that drove that, by the way. So did the research and was like, wow. So use and the research I didn't do myself. I had an apprentice do the research for me, other people's work, other people's ideas. And so I had my apprentice find all the information he could on hospitals and how it works and all this stuff. So we got all that done. Then we had to design the hostel. So I don't know anything about interior design, especially for young European travelers. We hired this young lady named Anishka, and she designed it all out. Then we needed somebody to build it out. And so got a contractor that we knew that we had done business with before, made a deal with him, right? So he financed most of the build out so that he can get a bigger return later. So other people's money. He financed most of the build out and did the work for that. And then was like, okay, so we have this thing built out. We got to open up, but we don't know anything about running a hospital. So what we do? We went to Loftel and asked for the guy who owned it. He happened to be there at the time. And we asked if he would teach us how to run a hostel, other people's experience, for a small fee, a tiny fee, right? I think it was like $1,700 or something. He said, I'll teach you how to run a hostel. And I was like, no, because I like to negotiate. I said, no, you teach us how to run the hostel, but you'll set up a booking system. You have your manager come to my place and troubleshoot the first week we're open. And if you have to guarantee us the first month of booking, so we know you're not trying to cheat us. And he said, okay, believe it or not. So we used his experience, and long story short, that guy had been the number one hostel in New York, and it was about, at the time, close to 1,000 hostels. Within a month, his manager decided to stay on with us, brought over the best workers from there, understood the system, had relationships with people, again, network, relationships with people that had gone to the hostel, hit the other hostel before. Within the second month, we were the number one hostel in New York. And from that, we were able to take the revenue from that to open a second, a third, and a fourth hostel, right, in New York City. So we had 3 in Brooklyn and 1 in Harlem. 1 month, without exaggerating, we netted in profit $83,000 in a month. So we went from nothing within a couple of months to having 4 locations and having incredible amounts of income. And we didn't really come out of pocket for a dime, except maybe the $1,700 we used to get the training from the other guy. So everything else was using the formula. Other people's money, other people's ideas, other people's resources, other people's work, other people's experience. Combined, not, oh, I'll take this one because I'm comfortable with it, or, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't know it. No, we used the whole formula combined. We're able to build something magnificent in a short amount of time. So I'm going to just give you a few other examples that you can do. So here's my promise to everybody. Listen, if you don't make money by the end of the week, you just didn't listen. So I'm going to give you some gems. And I'm simplifying it. I used to give these complicated things, and I realized too many choices makes people go crazy. Shrunk it down. Things that if you have, all right. So if you can borrow, even not even if you have $200, you'll be able to do everything on the list. Maybe 250. 250, everything on the list you'll be able to do, and should do. Don't wait. So, except this one. No, I shouldn't say. You can do this one too. And this one you can actually do without any of your money. So business income. Let's talk about business income. So business income means being a business owner and not self-employed, right? So that means you're selling a product, service, or information, which I believe has the least startup cost and least overhead, information, and the greatest return on investment by far, information. Right? But anyway, you can be a business owner, not self-employed. So using our formula, right? If you, and you probably don't know, the market for buying businesses is far more lucrative and easier than buying real estate. Let me say that again. The market for buying an existing profitable business is far more lucrative and easier to acquire than real estate. But because you're only familiar with real estate, you only go there. So every given year, there are between 11 and 12 million small businesses. I'm not talking about large businesses, because large businesses, you might have to have some extra skills in order to be able to run them. I'm talking about small businesses, right? So we're talking about maybe 100 employees or less. Every year, there are 11 to 12 million small businesses for sale. And unfortunately, for most business owners, because the business brokerages don't market the same way real estate brokerages do, and because most people don't think to buy a business, they want to start a business based on their goofy idea. And I say goofy because most of the ideas are goofy. Is you like them, but the market doesn't want them. Because that's the way people think to go into business. Most of those businesses stay on the market for over a year. So you're probably asking, why would a profitable business want to sell? There must be something wrong with the business. No, some people want to move on. Most of the businesses, people are over 60 and they've had it for a long time and they're making good money and they want to sell. And they want to transition to another phase in their life. So there are businesses that have a long track record, proven systems, and they're profitable and they're on the market. Because they're on the market for so long, and part of the reason they're on the market for so long is because it's not like you can get a mortgage to buy a property. You have to get a business loan in order to buy it. And most people don't know how to get a business loan. And so they take themselves out of the game because they say they don't have the money. So let's consider this. Because you're probably asking, well, how much does the business cost? The average business sells for 2 to 6 times its annual profits. So if a company makes $100,000 profit, minimally you're going to pay $200,000 for it, right? Because you're paying for future profits too. That's the way people sell businesses. Most times it's 2 times to 3 times, but sometimes if it's a phenomenal business, there's 6 times, right? If it's a phenomenal business, that could be around for a long time. But let's say you look for the stuff that's 2 times the annual profit. So let's say it's $100,000 profit. That means you need to come up with $200,000. Because businesses are on the market for so long, we got to go back to our formula. Right? So we know it has a system, other people's experience. We know it has employees, other people's work. We know somebody came up with the idea already, other people's ideas. We know that they already have suppliers and all these other things and all these other support resources. So we know there's other people's resources already. What's the only thing missing? Other people's money. For some bizarre reason, you would think, oh, I have to save up $200,000, or I don't have to. You shouldn't use your own $200,000. Because most of those businesses are on the market for so long, that means it's highly competitive. That means the leverage is actually on your side and not their side. Not only are they not going to sell it for 6 times as much because they're still on the market longer, they'll probably sell it for 2 times as much. Most of those businesses, because they're not in trouble, are not hard up for the cash right away. Because most of them are going into retirement, they already have money. They don't need all the money right away. 60% of those businesses are willing to do what you call seller financing. What does that mean? Instead of you going to the bank and borrowing the money, the actual seller will say, okay, I want $200,000 for my business. It makes $100,000 a year. Pay me off in 5 years. Right? So pay me off in 5 years plus some interest. That means you got to give him $40,000 plus interest a year. It means you get to keep close to $60,000 a year for a system that's already built, for a business that's already demonstrated profitability, where you know you can get $100,000. So you're not doing the work. You're the business owner. Other people are doing the work, and you're collecting close to $60,000. You're giving him $40,000 plus a little bit of interest on that for 5 years, and then it's all yours. That's using the formula. That's using the formula to get a, and again, if you're like, where do I buy a business? Listen, if you just Google search, I promise you, if you just Google search businesses for sale in the US or small businesses for sale, if you narrow it down in the US, your Google feed will fill up with business brokerages that has listings of thousands. I mean, literally each brokerage has thousands of businesses for sale and all the information you'll need to figure it out. And so it becomes like anything else. Do you have to learn how to qualify the business? Absolutely. You got to know if it's a good fit for you. But with 11 to 12 million to choose from, I'm sure you'll find something that's a good fit. So that's using the model, again, in its totality to be able to acquire instead of trying to start from scratch and build a business. And I tell people all the time, listen, most of the time, if it's your hobby, because that's what we try to sell, everybody else doesn't want it. And to make people want it, you probably have to change it in a way that's doesn't make you happy anymore. So I say make your money so you can do the things you want freely instead of trying to sell the thing that you like and being miserable trying to sell them. So that's one way. Another way, obviously, that you can do it is it's a little less personal ownership, but it's a business, is a franchise. A franchise is a business in a box. And you can get, again, financing usually from the franchisor to be able to purchase a franchise. You have to have some skin in the game to make you have a certain amount of capital. But you can borrow the money to do a franchise. It's a business in a box. You can do the same thing with a license. When you talk about CrossFit, CrossFit is not a franchise. CrossFit is a license. And I don't know if it's still the same amount, but it used to cost like $2,000 to say CrossFit, whatever. And then they give you training. You can buy equipment from them. You can use their systems. And all you did was buy a license, but you can not pay the fee and not be part of CrossFit anymore. So if we talk about simple things that you can do right away, right? That you don't have to have specialized skills for, that you can do right away, that don't cost you a lot of money out of pocket. This is something you can do. Anybody can do it. You just have to put in the exploratory effort, right? And commit to doing it. But it's doable. That's business income with the formula. Interest income. Interest income is a whole lot easier, and the barrier to entry for most of you would be much lower. And let's look at some things you can do now. It's peer-to-peer lending. So one of my favorites is gone. It used to be Lending Club. At the time, they were jumping. I had 750 loans in there. But peer-to-peer lending, you become the bank, right? And so they popped up when the banks weren't lending during the recession, and they needed to fill that vacuum because people will always borrow. And people borrow for a lot of things: school, business, credit card payoff, refinancing things, car loans, home improvement, like you name it, the list, medical expenses, the list goes on and on why people need loans. And what most people don't get is the bank doesn't have any of its own money, right? Your deposits don't really do a whole lot, but the bank has investors. that invest in the bank then does loans, the bank gets money and then pays the investors. Peer-to-peer lending cut out the middle person, kind of. So the peer lending company takes the applications, screens people, and then puts all the information there. You, as the investor, get to look at all the loans that people want, look at their background, look at their payment history, look at their credit, look at their income, look at everything about this person pretty much, except, private, except their personality. You get to see everything about them, their occupation, everything, all their income, and then you decide where you want to lend money. Now, you will do it the same way the banks do it, right? You don't, let's say there's 10 people who want to borrow today, and you qualify and you say, oh, okay, 4 of them look good based on the return I'm going to get and based on how it looks like they will perform in terms of paying it back. And let's say you have $100, but each of them wants, say, $5,000. You're not going to choose one and give $100. You're going to spread that $100 out into 4. So you're going to put 25, 25, 25, 25. And then we talk about keeping money. I'm going to get into that. But that way you spread out your risk. You spread out your risk. And so if one didn't perform, you don't lose all your money. Not that you ever lose it, because when you lend money, like I said, charge off. If you lost that 25, you write that off in your taxes. But it's better to get a return than to be able to have a write-off. But you minimize the risk of even having to charge off something by spreading it out over a multitude of loans. So it's called fractional lending. That's what banks do. You would never lend all of your money to one place because you increase your risk significantly as opposed to fractionally lending it. So like I said, when Lending Club was at its height, I had 750 loans out there. And the vast majority of them performed. So when you look at these things like Fundrise, which deals with real estate, Prosper, Funding Circle, a lot of they lend for different reasons. Fundrise, like I said, primarily deals with small real estate loans, and then the others are a variety of business and other things. Some let you invest for as little as $25. I think Fundrise is $250, might be. But the others, you can, if you only have $25, you can start. So again, if you have $250, you take 25 of it and you put one of them in peer lending, right? So the returns are a range of between 5 and 35%, and that's based on the risk. So if it's a high risk, that's 35%. Now, you're going to have to get a strategy. Like my strategy is 90-10, meaning 90% I put in low risk stuff that's around the 10% return area, and then 10% in the high risk stuff that's maybe the windfall 25 to 35% area, because this stuff is short things and some of these things don't make it, but the amount I lose here is offset by the gains here, the small gains here and the big gains there. But that's, that's getting into strategy, which we don't have time for. If you want to be super safe, they have CDs, certificates of deposits, currently at rates above 5%, so 5.4%. And a CD is like a you have 1 year and 2 year commitments where you got to lock the money up. You can't get your money out for a year or two. But if you go on bankrate.com, and you look for CD accounts, you'll find a whole bunch of them at around the 5% range. So that's zero risk, because they have FDIC insured, zero risk, but your money's tied up for a year or more. High interest savings, if you don't want to tie your money up, currently at 4.5%. Again, you go on bankrate.com and look for high interest or high yield savings accounts. You can get 4.5%. I don't know why, if you have a savings account in some other bank or you have excess money in your checking account, I don't know why it's there, but you should have it in a high yield or high interest savings account, or while just parking it while it's making good interest. So these are things you should be doing and can do. And if you don't do them, shame on you. Then you got to fight your human nature and do it. You can do that tomorrow. Then we talk about dividend income. So dividend income, again, comes from stocks. There's some specialized knowledge that you should have before you jump into stocks. If you don't have that specialized knowledge, I would not recommend you deal with stocks. If you have some specialized knowledge, you want to look for a dividend yield of 3% or more. If you don't have the specialized knowledge, what you can do tomorrow is get an index fund. So, and I narrowed it down. Like, I hate giving companies, but these companies are top notch, been around forever. Vanguard started the whole S&P 500 index funds. Fidelity has phenomenal S&P 500. I use Fidelity myself. Index funds with zero fees. And an index fund is a mutual fund that only invests in the S&P 500, which is the top 500 performing companies in the country. On the stock market. And a lot of them pay dividends. So index fund is the cheat sheet for jumping in, and the average over a 20-year span return on an index fund is 10%. I think last year was like 19 point something percent. This year it's a little lower, a lot lower, because of everything that happened after with the inflation. But it'll bounce back. So 20-year average is 10%, but there's some years it's 20-something%, some years it's maybe 7-8%. But that's the cheat sheet. So you'll get both capital appreciation and you'll get dividends from index funds. You can also do what you call a REIT. Fidelity has REITs, Vanguard has REITs, real estate investment trust. REITs are not allowed to hold money inside they have to pay dividends. They're not allowed to hold on to money. That's one of the rules of a real estate investment trust. So it's like a mutual fund that don't invest in real estate, kind of, in a nutshell, and they have to pay you quarterly. So again, that's a cheat sheet. And you can start those with $1. So I don't want to hear, I'm going to wait till I get some money. That drives me nuts. People say, I'm going to wait till I get some. No. Time. Put it in now, because every dollar that's in there over time, if it's in there, it's growing. If it's in your pocket, it's losing. Rental income. We know there's vacation rentals. If you're outside of New York City, you can still do Airbnb, HomeAway, Flipkey, or VRBO. Right? We know that. But you can also rent your car if you're not using it all the time with Turo, hire a car, get around. You can rent out stuff like equipment and tools and all kind of anything else on Craigslist, Skipty, Zlock, peer renters, rent items. Like you can go on those sites and there's dozens and dozens. They have pretty much sites that you can rent anything and you can put your stuff up there, for rent. So if you have stuff sitting around that you're not using or you use it infrequently, or you just want to get a better return on your investment because you paid for it and it's only depreciating in value as it's sitting there in time, right? So those are one of those depreciating assets. If it's equipment, it might as well make money for you, right? And again, that costs you nothing. It costs you nothing to for some of these things to post it, and it's just pure income. So again, something you can do tomorrow. So take your inventory of all your stuff that you don't need to use constantly and rent it out. Royalty income. This is one of my favorites because most people don't think they can ever collect royalty income. So royalties, it's like dividends, right? But it's income you collect on books, songs, music, movies. And you can get licensing fees too. So for photographs or videos, you go on Pixabay and put your stuff up there. Now, I will tell you, the thing that is in great demand is black faces in every type of situation. It's hard to get black images in business stuff. It's hard to get black images in something that shows love or care. It's hard for anything relating to medical or health. If you can take black faces doing anything, you will make tons of money from licensing your photographs and your videos. So that is a gimme. Like tomorrow, start posting black faces on, and I said Pixels and Pixabay is just a couple of sites, but there are way more. Public domain is one of my favorites. So people say, what is public domain? Public domain are works of art, music, literature that do not have a copyright. So anything written before 1923 automatically is in the public domain. So when you see the classics and you see like there are 10 different publishers selling it, they paid nothing for the rights to that, and it's all profit, right? Except the printing cost. When you look at different versions of, let's say you've seen The Art of War, but now you see The Art of War for Housewives, or The Art of War for Businessmen, or The Art of War for whatever. They took the original Art of War free of charge because it was written 1,000 years ago or so, and modified it and then copyrighted that version of it. right? So you can take any work that's in the public domain. You have to make sure it's in the 1923 or before, and some works before, I believe, 1963 that didn't renew their copyright or in the public domain. You can sell them as is, but you can't copyright it, or you can change some words or make a commentary or modify and modernize the language and copyright your version of it. Now, how do we use the formula for that, though, right? And so you can use a ghostwriter, do somebody else's work. So you can, if you go on Upworks, and that's just one place you can go. Upworks, there's somebody who will write the whole book for you. You tell them your idea, and they'll write it for you. You can use Chat GPT, which is free AI to reconfigure something and put it in a book format. You can go on Medium and use other people's work, meaning you can write it and then other people can add to it, edit it, tell you what's good or bad, and recreate your whole thing, and the copyright is still yours. There are a lot of different ways that you can do that using the formula. So if we look at that, let's just look at, there's a guy named, I don't know if I put it on the next slide. Okay, so there's a guy named Ryan Holiday, and he's made a whole business off of there's a philosophy that came out of Rome called Stoicism, Stoic philosophy. And Marcus Aurelius is like the icon of Stoicism. And he made a work called The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And it's a movement that is growing today. So Ryan Holiday took the original writings and made a dozen books or so based on Stoicism from the original work, and has copywritten that and created an entire business where he makes literally millions and millions of dollars off of something that you could have gotten for free in the public domain. Now, how do you, again, use the formula? So, of course, other people's ideas, other people's experience, other people's work. Now, let's talk about other people's resources, though. You can go to a print-on-demand company, right? And so, and there's lots of those, so I don't want to necessarily recommend one because there are a lot of them. And when you go to the print-on-demand, they have all the formats there. You just drag and drop the content in there. So again, if you took Marcus Aurelius's work and just modified or modernized some of the language and had your modern version of Stoicism, you drag and drop it in there. It will format it into a book format. You can drag and drop a cover. And then they will market it for you, but you can also market it with a link back to their website where people can buy it. And when they buy it, they will print it only on demand based on when that person pays, print it on demand and ship it directly to the person. So it costs you nothing. You got a book from public domain. You can, again, use Chat GPT to edit it and modernize it, drag and drop it into a print on demand website, market it. That might cost you something unless you use like social media marketing or something, so it really doesn't have to cost you anything. Market it, people buy it, and they will print it on demand and ship it, and you get royalty income from that. So everybody, because there are literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of books in print on demand on every subject matter you can imagine, there's no reason why you'd have to write your own thing. You can grab something from there and do that. And again, cost you nothing. So all of that is good. That teaches you how to make money. And I'm going to wrap this up soon. I know we started late, but I'm going to try to wrap it up. All of that is good because that will make you money. What I discovered was I was teaching people how to make money, but I wasn't teaching people the next skill, because it's a totally different skill, which is how to make money. I mean, how to keep money, right? It's one skill to make money. That's a skill. It's a whole different skill to keep money. And so I'm going to share some ways to keep money now that you probably never get in a workshop, because that's not the sexy part of wealth, right? So the idea is what we call the delta, right? It's all about the delta. And you're like, what in the heck is the delta? So that's a mathematical concept. It's the distance between the highs and the lows. So we never concern ourselves with the highest highs or the lowest lows. And there's a reason for that. Some of the highest highs are not based on your efforts, but they're based on how the economy is doing and societal trends that have nothing to do with you. They're external. You can ride those trends and ride those waves, but you can't control those trends or control those waves. And so if you understand how to tap into them, you'll get highs that are above your norm. Conversely, there are things that happen in the economy, there are things that happen socially, there are things that happen technologically that will drag your stuff down due to no effort of your own. And if you know how to ride those things, you'll bounce back up. But it's not about being volatile. It's about how quickly you can get to that steady place you need to be. So you have to be flexible, nimble, and quick to get back to there. So variability and flexibility give you that ability to stay steady. And why do I say that? Because there is no investment, there is no business that becomes viable forever, right? In its current state. There has to be modification to it because the whole world is changing. And if you don't modify or make an adjustment, that thing that was profitable before under certain conditions no longer is profitable under new conditions. So to get around that, we have a well-diversified, now I know you've heard the term diversified probably before, but we have a well-diversified portfolio. Now, if you diversify, it might slow your growth initially because you're not putting all your efforts into one thing, but in the long term, it'll help you maintain far more. So I never used to teach the concept of diversifying. I used to say, put it all in here and just skyrocket. Choose real estate or choose business or choose, no, can't do that. Not if you want to keep it. Because inevitably, when the economy shifts, one of those things is going to go down. And then you'll be suffering for a long period of time and then have to come back up. So let's just talk about this. So diversification. Diversification works in two ways. We have what we call horizontal diversification and we have vertical diversification. And you probably never heard that concept, but horizontal diversification, when you're talking about stocks and or asset classes, is to have money in stocks or I should say equities, interest, real estate, royalties, to have across the board, right? So you want to diversify across the board in terms of assets, and we're going to also talk about income. And why would you do that? Because when one asset class is down, all asset classes are not down. Like, so for instance, we said they're going to raise interest rates. So what does that mean? It means your equities or stock values are probably going to go down for some of your stocks, right? Your consumer staples will go up, but your tech stuff will go down. So if you diversify in your stocks, then some things will go down while others go up. But at the same time, interest income goes up because they're raising interest rates. So that means your CDs, your high interest rates, your bonds, everything is going to go up, right? So you always have something going up while something else is going down. So that's how you find your steady place in the middle. So the more you're spread out, the less risk you have and the greater steadiness that you'll maintain. So vertical, again, is when you're in the same asset class, but you do different things in that asset class that are what we call uncoupled. So I'll give you an example. I had a friend who I was explaining this concept to, and he was like, well, well, his horizontal diversification, he said, I'm well diversified. And I said, well, tell me how you diversify. So he's an IT guy, right? He works for an IT company as an employee, right? So that's his earned income. And then he does IT work for himself as a business, self-employed on the side. So he has a business income as an IT guy. And then he invests in the stock market in tech stuff. And then, right, so if you just go across, yeah, it's different types of income, but they're not uncoupled. So uncoupled means that they're unrelated. So if tech goes down, his company could lay him off, his IT business could go down, and his stock in the tech companies go down all at the same time. That's not being well diversified because they're not what we call uncoupled or unrelated. even though they're different areas of income, they're all the same, because when one goes down, they all go down anyway. So we don't want to do that. When we talk about diversity, humans thrive in diversity, by the way. We thrive in a diversity of income, we thrive in a diversity of food, the diversity of activity, diversity of relationships, and some of our friendships, right? We thrive when we have diversity. That's how humans thrive. We're wired that way too. So you might as well take advantage of that. So most people, unfortunately, get all their income from, as mentioned before, 2 or 3 sources of income. But in a down cycle, like if they, and again, they get it from cash, equities, and real estate. I'm sorry, they get earned income, profit income, and rental income, right? And then have all their wealth parked in cash, equities, and real estate. But the problem is these tend to all go down together, and these all go down together, right? Earned income and profit income tend to go down together, and cash, equities, and real estate all tend to go down together. So in a down cycle, you lose everything because, again, they're not uncoupled. So if we look at a model for diversified income, right? So if we have earned income, you might have a job, you might be an independent contractor and self-employed. You might have all 3 of those ways of getting money. You might, in your profit income, maybe you flip properties every once in a while, you sell some items you made, you got some precious metals that when the down economy, they go up in value, so you sell those. You might be trading Forex, if that's your thing. You might have other collectibles that you've been holding on for a long time. If you have business income, you have a corporation or an LLC where other people are doing work for you in a particular business type or 2 or 3 different business types. You might have a brick and mortar place. You might have it online because they might be selling different things and they have different mechanisms, different target markets for how you sell. Dividend income, you might have stocks, you might have what you call exchange traded products, which is exchange traded funds or exchange traded notes. You might have mutual funds, index funds. You can go down the line, right? Interest income, you might spread out between bonds, peer lending, crowdfunding, and private lending. Rental income, real estate, maybe some equipment, maybe your vehicle. Royalties, you may have books, videos, clip art, maybe you have a blog or YouTube channel, something. So you want to be able to fill in all these categories in things that are very diverse. And it's not problematic if you're not trying to do everything yourself. It sounds overwhelming if you think you are the one who has to do these things. But remember, if we use the formula, other people are doing the bulk of the work and financing it. And you're using other people's ideas. So if you, again, stick to that OP formula, OP5 formula, and you stick to diversity of income, diversity of assets, and you focus on wealth and equity and income producing assets, then you'll be better off for the long term. All right. So you'll always have money. And then what you start to do is that you start tapering off as you get older from the earned income and the profit income, because you took the time to build up the other incomes, and they will replace that income because, remember, compounded growth, they'll make more income over time. The last thing about keeping money, you have to understand that there's separate tax systems in America. There's a tax system for laborers, and there's a tax system for the producers of labor. And so what does that mean? Most of you are taxed at the ordinary income tax rate. So if you have any earned income, that active income, earned income, then you get taxed if you're the lowest earners at 10%, but the highest earners at 37%. And that's in contrast to, and that comes out of your gross income. That comes right off the top. Before you get it, you get taxed on it. Or if you're an independent contractor, you better have saved it up because you're going to pay it at the end, which is different from corporate tax. So corporate taxes are only paid on the profits, meaning on the net. So a corporation who employs, right, and it can employ you or it can employ a bunch of people, because they now produce labor, because they hire labor, the government gives them an incentive, meaning they only have to pay 21% on their net profits. What does that mean? Not how much money they make, how much money they have left over after they spend as much as they need to or want to on anything, this is the definition, on anything that is ordinary and or necessary in the course of doing business. So ordinary means everybody's doing it. Necessary, you can justify it to make your business better. So Once all that money is spent, whatever they have left over, they pay 21% only on what's left over. You can overspend, and the losses are carried over to the next year to offset your gains for the next year. And you can carry a loss for a dozen years, 20 years, 100 years. It's okay as long as you're continuously trying to do business. And the best taxes are for the people who are lenders and investors, right? Because without lenders and investors, there is no business. I told you that's how businesses work. So if you're on the side of lending money, then you pay what we call long-term capital gains, which is different from short-term. Long-term capital gains means you held the investment for a year and a day or more. Your tax rate is from 0 to 20% based on what your ordinary income is. If you don't get any ordinary income, or you're in the lowest tax bracket of ordinary income, which you should be, because we don't want to get ordinary income, because ordinary income only gives us cash. If you're in the lowest level, and now let me just explain this. If you don't sell your investment or take out your cash in your investment, you pay no taxes on it. It can gain $1 million in a year. As long as you leave it there, you pay nothing on that $1 million. That's called unrealized gains. You only pay on realized capital gains, meaning you took it out and turned it to cash. If you take it out and turn it to cash, the maximum you can, if you were in the highest income earners of ordinary income, is 20%. If you were in the lowest income earners, 0 taxes. I don't care how much money you made. You can make $1 billion if you are in the lowest level of ordinary income tax rate, meaning you don't have active income, then you pay no taxes on it. So the incentive is for you to do this. The incentive is for you to do this, and the incentive is for you to do this. There's no incentive for you to continue to do earned income over the long term unless you do just enough to be in poverty. Right. So that's how you keep your money. And then really quickly, how you make it grow. I'm not going to go into a long thing of that because it's really late. But you have to evaluate your assets periodically. What's performing? Why is it performing? Why is it not performing? If something is performing because of all these trends that we see outside, then we increase our position size in that asset or that income area. All right. So, and we decrease it in other areas that are not producing, and things that no longer show they can produce at all, we dump them completely. We get rid of them. That's called rebalancing your portfolio. And you have to do that. Some people do it quarterly, rebalance. Some people do it based on the signals that we get. Again, watching the news and understanding the language that's encrypted. When you unencrypt it, then you know to make certain moves. And then the last thing, how do you pass it on? Everybody here should have a will. If you do not know how to create a will, I have a template. Just email me when this is over. By tomorrow morning, I'll send you a template. There's no excuse for you not to have a will, because if you do not have a will, and you have something, trust me, you may not think it's a value, but you have stuff. And people will fight over it if you are not very specific as to how you want your stuff distributed. So a will is a must for everyone. In a trust, if you have things of high value or things that could be contested by someone else, you want to make sure somebody gets it uncontested, you put it in a trust and it transfers to the person easily without the ability for it to be go into probate or go to court for somebody to fight over. So it can be any property, it can be anything of value, any asset you could put in a trust. And get off of TikTok. You don't need to don't put stuff in a trust while use it for most things while you're alive. It's a good transfer of wealth from intergenerationally, but it's usually a horrible tool because you give up control of it, and there are a lot of rules that you don't really want to deal with. So I know people say, "Oh, put your real estate in a trust." No, do not, because then it's no longer yours. When you don't want it to be yours, you put it in a trust to transfer it to the next generation. So only difference between irrevocable and revocable. Irrevocable, once you write it, you say it's irrevocable, it can never change, which I think is terrible because things happen. You can do a revocable trust, meaning I can change it at any time except if I die. If I die, it becomes irrevocable, and that's okay because you don't care you die. So most of the time, use a revocable trust as opposed to irrevocable trust. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up really quickly. So if we go back, the process of being able to grow, keep, or make, keep, and grow wealth. One, you got to learn the language, right? If you don't know the language, you'll be left out. Not only you'll be left out of opportunities because you'll be hearing about opportunities you don't know. You won't be able to analyze the deal. You won't know when to pull the trigger. There's so many things you won't know if you don't know the language. And once you learn the language, you can change your perspective, right? You'll be looking from a different vantage point. When you look at a different vantage point, you see something totally different than everyone else. You'll see things you never saw before. You have to develop the requisite skills. There's no way that you're going to drag forward the skills that you have and succeed at another level. You will learn skills and it will take some time. The skills you don't have currently, you will borrow or pay for from somebody else until you learn those skills. You have to learn to manage your expectations. Growing wealth is different from that one-to-one feedback transfer. There's a time element and there's a risk element that is involved. You have to learn to manage your expectations and see it differently than you did before. You have to take action not only immediately when opportunity arises, but you have to be consistent in being able to manage what you do so that it continues to maintain wealth for you. And you have to adapt as frequently as the world does. Again, the world is constantly changing, whether we're talking about politically, socially, technologically, economically. The world is changing and you have to be nimble. It can't be like you did before. I'm going to stay on my job for 30 years and do the same thing and expect to get paid more. No, now you have to keep adapting and adjusting, which is a beautiful thing, to stay in rhythm with the world as opposed to becoming obsolete yourself. So that's the process. And when do you start, or when should you start? Tomorrow. And why? There's an African proverb that I love. I live by this. You don't wait until you're thirsty to dig a well. And I love that, right? You can't wait until you're thirsty and then start digging. No, there are foundational things, fundamental things that have to be put in place in order for you to get to where you want to be. And you need to start that now. Why? Because time is the most important resource in reaching your goals. And none of us are getting younger. And if you've already started late, that means that the amount of time you have left to get where you want is shorter. So that means you have to be more aggressive with it. So when I say start tomorrow, if you don't have a dime, start tomorrow, right? There's most of those things you can open the account. It doesn't mean you have even a dime to put in, but when you get a dime, put it in there, right? So start immediately. Now, I know a lot of what I said is challenging, and there was a registration form most of you filled out, and I looked at the statistics because that was a good gauge for me. And over 90% of you said that you would take a course. Well, 100% of people said they would love to learn from an expert, take a course. But 90% of the people said they would like to take a course and be basically handheld after the course to make sure they're successful. And so I created something from this. Now, again, this is not the financial freedom course that some people took years ago. This has elements of what you need to do before, parts of the financial freedom course, and what you need to do after. So this is, to me, the masterpiece of the whole thing. This is like the culmination of all that years of experience. It's like, okay, what do I have to do because I don't have the foundational things? What do I have to do to accelerate the growth, and what do I have to do to maintain that and then be able to pass that on freely? So I created a program, starts with a 6-week course. Always starts with that. So that doesn't change, but the course is different. So you're going to learn to decipher money language, gain a wealth-producing perspective first, so that you can recognize and capitalize on important trends, economic cycles, and income opportunities. That's important. We have to understand that. Then you're going to gain the skills to acquire and profit from the 7 major income streams, the ones we talked about. So not just the things I gave you that you can do tomorrow, but dozens of other ways. Then you're going to understand how and when, this is important, to rebalance your income portfolio to minimize loss and maximize profits. That's a skill I've never taught in those classes before, but I think it's necessary. Implement a tax strategy for maximum retention. So you're not giving it all away, right? It's no sense making the money and giving it all away. And then the best ways to protect, preserve, and pass on your assets to loved ones and worthy causes. All right, so that's important. Now, what am I going to do different? So we're going to have the 6 live streamed interactive skills sessions. So we're going to do that. That's familiar to some people. It's going to be every Wednesday starting October 11th. So it'll be 6 consecutive Wednesdays from 7 to 9. You'll get links to the video replay. You'll get the slides in the PDF format. Always do that. You'll get support resources in the form of a workbook, important links, and apps. Always do that. You get weekly action steps to keep you on track. Always do that. This is what's different that I haven't done before. For 6 months following the course, once a month, we're going to come together again on Zoom and do a post-course support session, which means I'm going to keep track of your progress. I'm going to help you get over hurdles that you run into after the coursework is over to make sure you've digested it and you're implementing it properly. And sometimes there are novel things that come up. Economy changes, new technology happens. What do we do with that? Now, as a group, we're coming together and we're addressing that. We're dealing with that. So I'm going to give you, again, 6 months of follow-up in regards to supporting you after the course is over. So you got to ask yourself, okay, well, if I want to invest in my future, and some of you have invested in college and got not much out of it. Some of you invested in a whole host of crappy stuff and not really got a bunch out of it. But to really be able to turn your life around finally, right, and meet your financial goals, put the tools in place, get the support you need to be able to live the life of your dreams, you got to ask yourself, what is it worth to invest in yourself for that? Now, let's be honest. Big name wealth gurus, and I'm not going to call any names, but $5,000, $25,000 for their programs. I'm not going to charge you $5,000. I'm just going to charge you $2,500. But I think $1,500 is a fair price that most people can afford, especially because I'm going to give you 100% money back guarantee. So what does that mean? You get to test drive it for an entire year. And if at the end of the year, you decide it's not for you, didn't help you, or maybe it helped you, but you don't feel like paying, I'll give you every single penny back. Because for me, developing this relationship is going to be more important than you being an unsatisfied customer and me keeping your $1,500. So no questions asked, no hassle, 100% money back guarantee on $1,500. But if you know me, you know I like to give a whole lot away. So I'm going to do something I've never done before too. I'm going to add significant value. So I have a whole host of courses that I've done over the years that are on video, and they have supporting materials. And this will help you get through some of the things that we can't cover in the coursework. So Inside Secrets to Obliterating Debt. If you have debt, I have a video course and a supporting workbook. I'm going to give you that. Some of you need to work on your credit. I have a big, ginormous book, Inside Secrets to Near Perfect Credit, an ebook. I'm going to give you that. Here's where the big value comes. I did a full course on stock investing. I'm going to give you that, Insider Secrets to Stock Investing. So even though we're going to cover it in class, this goes way more in depth because it's longer than what we can cover in class. I'm going to give you that. Some of you want to do real estate investing. Yes, we're going to cover it in class, but I did a whole course where, again, I can cover much more. I'm going to give you that video course. Some of you want to be entrepreneurs. I did a whole course. I'm going to give you that. So I'm going to give you the full complement of courses that I've taught in the past. And you're talking about days worth of video that you can go through and supporting materials. On top of that, I'm going to add on 3 one-on-one consultations. So you're going to get the 6 group consultations or 6 group support sessions. You're going to get the course. You're going to get the full complement of courses I've offered in the past. And I'm going to give you 3 one-on-one consultations. That's well over $3,000 value. And again, it's $1,500 with the money back guarantee. But of course, you know me, I like to do a little better. It's important for me to be able to use your success story. So if you allow me to use a success story, I'll take an additional $300 off. Not when I use your story, but if you agree to it now, I'll take an additional $300 off. So you're talking about $1,200 for all that stuff that I'm giving. And just to ease your ability to pay, you can do it in an installment plan, which means you can spread the $1,200 over 12 months. So that's $100 a month for 12 months. And you can get started by filling out the registration form. So again, it starts October 11th. You get the course, you get the 6 months of follow-up, you get 3 one-on-one sessions, you get the full complement of all the courses that I've offered in the past. And I'm going to actually put this link, see if I can, in the comments. Let's see. There's 3 options. You choose the one that you want, and it will hopefully I'll see most of you. Now, I'm probably going to do this again next week because there were a lot of people who ended up getting locked out of the, or maybe I'll do the video replay. I'm going to post at least a video replay next week for people who, we had some problem with the link earlier. So if you know someone, I guess you can have them kind of, I'm going to post it on Facebook, all social media. I'll post it and I'll do an email with the link to of a video replay of this so that people who missed it can catch it too. Oh, you're welcome, Celia. All right, so like I said, that's the link. If you don't have any questions, hopefully by tomorrow you'll start putting the pieces in place so you can start making money, and hope to see most of you on the 11th. So I have a way we always end our classes. You're gonna have to wake up your neighbors. So we always yell success, because that's what we're trying to invoke. So we're gonna, on 3, we're gonna yell success, and then we're gonna end this Zoom. And I appreciate all of you for being here tonight. So on 3, 1, 2, 3, success!